The girl didn't knock at first. She just stood there, her shoes too thin for the cold dirt road, her dress too light for the hour. A yellow ribbon in her tangled hair was the only bright thing about her. She must have been 10, maybe younger. Her voice was quiet, but steady when it came. "Mama's too sick to come, so I came instead." The man who answered the door didn't speak right away. His boots were half-laced, his shirt buttoned wrong like he'd rushed. His name was Ellis Ward, and he was not a man used to surprises. But the sight of a child alone at his porch in the last stretch of dusk made his heart do something strange, like a stutter. He crouched down, rough hands resting on his knees. His eyes met hers. "You came from the Holcomb place?" She nodded. Ellis stood and glanced out at the road behind her. Nothing but the dust and long grass, and the sky going purple. No wagon, no grown-up, just this child with big eyes and chapped lips. She looked like she hadn't eaten since yesterday. "You walked all that way?" She didn't answer that, just twisted the hem of her dress. He stepped back and held the door open. Inside, the house was warm but not clean. A man living alone never keeps things too neat, not unless he's got something to prove. Ellis wasn't one of those men. The girl sat at the table without being asked. Her hands shook when she reached for the tin cup of water he gave her. "What's your name?" "June." "How bad is your mama?" "She can't stand. Fever's got her. She asked me to come tell you. Said you knew what to do." Ellis didn't respond to that right away either. The fire cracked behind them, and the ticking clock on the mantel seemed too loud. He leaned against the counter and watched her drink like she'd been crossing desert. "You eat anything today?" She shook her head. He scooped a bit of stew into a chipped bowl and set it in front of her. June didn't thank him. She just picked up the spoon and started like someone who knew better than to talk when food was in front of her. Ellis hadn't seen Clara Holcomb in 3 years. Not since the winter he helped bury her husband, when the snow came early and stayed too long. She'd been soft-spoken and too thin even then. The sort of woman folks judged quietly because they didn't understand the way grief hollows a person out. He hadn't thought she'd remember him, let alone send her child to find him. After the girl ate, he gave her a blanket and let her rest on the small cot near the stove. He sat up long after that, the fire burning low. He didn't like how easily the past had come knocking on his door. He didn't like that it came with a child's voice. Ellis wasn't who he used to be. Most people thought he was just a carpenter now, building fences and fixing wagons for cheap. But that wasn't always true. There was a time he rode with a different kind of crew, men with fast hands and faster lives. Men who knew how to disappear when things got ugly. Ellis left that life behind, or at least he buried it deep. Moved west, changed his name, took jobs that didn't ask questions. But the guilt stayed. That kind of thing never leaves. It just waits. The next morning, he hitched his mule and put June on the seat beside him. She didn't talk much, just held the bread he gave her in her lap and stared straight ahead. When they reached the Holcomb place, he felt something shift in his chest. The house leaned like it might fall with the next wind. The roof sagged worse than he remembered. The front step had caved in. When he walked inside, the smell of sickness hit hard. Sweat, mold, blood. Clara Holcomb lay on a straw mattress in the back room, her skin pale and glistening. Her lips moved when she saw him, but no sound came. Ellis knelt beside her and took her hand. It felt like holding ice wrapped in paper. He got to work without a word. Boiled water, clean cloths, fed her what he could. Days passed that way. June helping where she could, Ellis staying through nights that felt endless. But something kept bothering him. June never cried, never asked for her mama, never leaned close like kids usually do when they're scared. She watched, listened, moved like someone older than her years. And Clara, she barely spoke. When she did, her words didn't always make sense. Fever dreams and old pain tangled together. Once, she grabbed Ellis's wrist and whispered, "Don't let him find her." He didn't ask who. One evening, he found June standing outside with her arms folded tight. The sky behind her was gold, and her shadow stretched long across the dirt. "You said you ain't seen my mama in years," she said. But you looked like you knew her well. Ellis leaned against the porch rail. I did. A long time ago. She ever tell you about my daddy? He hesitated. Not much. June looked down at her boots. He wasn't a good man. I figured. She said he got what he deserved. That's why we had to leave Tennessee. But we didn't come far enough. Ellis straightened. You think someone's coming? She didn't answer. Clara's fever broke 2 days later, but her strength didn't come back. She lay in silence most hours, her eyes half open, watching the ceiling like it might speak to her. Ellis tried not to press, but something about June's words, it stuck. That night, Ellis checked the barn, then the road. He hadn't been careful in years, but now he started carrying a pistol again, the kind of habit that comes back easy when you've lived a certain life. He found the first sign just past the creek. Boot prints. Deep. Wide. Not from any neighbor. Then a fire pit with still warm ash. Someone was close. Someone watching. He told June to sleep in the back room that night, next to her mother. He kept the lantern low and the pistol near. When a knock came, it wasn't loud. Just a slow, deliberate sound against the door. Ellis opened it with the gun already in hand. The man standing there smiled. Thin lips. Crooked teeth. His coat too fine for someone on foot. His eyes flicked past Ellis, trying to see inside. You Ellis Ward? He asked. Ellis didn't answer. The man looked around like admiring the place. You got something of mine. Little girl. Name's June. Belongs to me. Ellis didn't lower the gun. She ain't a thing you own. The man raised both hands like it was some kind of joke. I'm her uncle. Legally. Papers say so. She says different. Kids lie. Ellis's finger twitched near the trigger. The man smiled again, slower this time. You really want to make this your problem? Ellis didn't move. Not until the man finally backed away, slow and calm, like someone who knows he'll get what he came for eventually. Ellis locked the door after him and didn't sleep that night. The next morning, Clara tried to sit up. He's come, hasn't he? She asked, her voice like gravel. Ellis nodded. She closed her eyes. He ain't her uncle. He's her father's brother. Worse than him in every way. Why didn't you go to the sheriff? Clara laughed once, low and bitter. You think a lawman in these parts cares about a woman like me? Ellis knew better than to argue. He packed their things that evening. Not much, just what they could carry. June sat on the porch steps, quiet like always. She looked up when Ellis told her they were leaving. Where to? Anywhere but here. June didn't speak for a while. Then she asked, You ever kill a man? The question was sharp. Too sharp for her age. Ellis didn't lie. Once. June nodded like that made sense. Me too. But it didn't stick. Ellis stared at her. And for the first time, he saw her not just as a child, but as a survivor of something darker than he had guessed. The road ahead wouldn't be easy, but it wouldn't be as lonely either. Not now that the past had crawled back into the light. And not now that both of them had someone else to carry the weight with. Ellis had been on the road for 2 days, heading west with Clara and June in a borrowed wagon that creaked like it might fall apart before the hills turned golden. He didn't say much, and neither did they. Clara slept most of the time, bundled in blankets, her skin still paper thin. June sat next to Ellis with her hands in her lap, eyes scanning the horizon like she was expecting trouble. They stopped at a town called Bitter Creek by the 3rd day. It was the sort of place Ellis used to drift through, back when drifting was all he did. A bank, a saloon, a church that looked like it had been painted by someone with no hands. He pulled the wagon beside a livery stable and helped Clara down. She was lighter than he remembered, almost not there at all. We'll stay 1 night, he said. 2, if needed. No more. He booked a room above the mercantile, paid in cash. June didn't ask where the money came from, but she looked at him differently afterward. Ellis noticed. The town had a doctor, or at least someone who claimed to be, a woman named Ruth Avery. She had calloused fingers and sharp eyes, and the way she looked at Ellis when he introduced Clara made his skin itch. Clara Holcomb, Ruth said slowly. Haven't heard that name in years. You knew her? Ruth shrugged. She used to come through with her husband. They'd pass through in spring, pick up work south. She was quiet. He wasn't. Clara didn't speak while Ruth cleaned her wounds and gave her something bitter to drink. June stood by the window, arms crossed, jaw tight. Ellis knew that stance. He used to wear it himself when he was cornered and didn't trust anyone in the room. That night, while the town slept, Ellis went downstairs to find Ruth reading by lantern light. She didn't look surprised to see him. "You planning to tell me what trouble you're running from?" she asked. "No." "Fair enough." She closed the book. But Bitter Creek ain't a place to hide long. People here got good memories and small mouths. That combination leads to suspicion. He nodded, then turned to go. But before he reached the stairs, she called after him. "That little girl, June, she yours?" "No." "She look at you like you are." Ellis didn't answer that. He just kept climbing. In the morning, they found a man leaning against the wagon. Big shoulders, flat nose, clothes too clean for a farmhand. He looked like someone who used to carry a badge, or a gun for hire, or both. "You Ellis?" the man asked. Ellis didn't confirm it. "I heard you do good work with your hands. Carpentry. Fixing roofs." "That right?" Ellis narrowed his eyes. "Sometimes." The man nodded toward the church. "Roof's been leaking since winter. Preacher don't have coin to fix it." "I do. You interested in staying a while?" "I'm not." "Shame. Man like you could earn respect here." Ellis didn't like the way the man said respect. Like it came with strings. "What's your name?" Ellis asked. "Name's Ryland Tuck." Ellis didn't shake his hand. "Appreciate the offer." Tuck smiled, but it didn't reach his eyes. "Doors open. Don't wait too long. Town's got a memory." Ellis kept his eyes on Tuck as he walked away. He had the gait of a man who knew exactly where the soft spots were in every room and how to press them. Later that day, June wandered off without asking. Ellis found her sitting outside the stable, talking to a boy her age with straw-colored hair and smudges of soot on his cheeks. "This is Hank," she said when Ellis approached. "He works for the blacksmith." The boy nodded. "I shoe horses, sweep floors, sometimes sleep under the workbench if the weather's bad." June seemed lighter talking to him, her voice less sharp. Ellis crouched. "You didn't tell me you were going." "I didn't think I had to." He exhaled. "Next time, tell me." She nodded, but didn't look sorry. The blacksmith came out then, an older man named Arlen who'd known Ellis in another life, back when both their hands weren't so steady. "You're traveling with Clara Holcomb?" Arlen asked, wiping grease on his apron. Ellis didn't reply. "She used to ride through with a man named Boyd. Mean bastard. Heard he died." "He did." "Good." Arlen spat. "He owed me money." Ellis didn't mention what Clara had told him about Boyd's brother. Didn't mention the knock at his door or the man who claimed to own June. Instead, he said, "We won't be here long." Arlen raised a brow. "With Ruth Avery checking on her every day? With June making friends?" Ellis said nothing, and Arlen let it drop. That night, Clara spoke for the first time since arriving in town. Her voice was hoarse but certain. "Ryland Tuck used to ride with Boyd." Ellis looked at her. "You sure?" "I never forget a man who smiled when he hurt people." Ellis sat down beside her bed. "You think he knows who June is?" "He knows, but he won't say it yet. He'll wait. He's clever like that." Ellis leaned forward. "Why did you come back here?" Clara turned her head slowly. "I was out of places to run." They sat in silence, listening to the wind shake the shutters. "I think he's looking for the money," Clara whispered. "Boyd stole a lot before he died. Ryland always believed I knew where it went." Ellis rubbed his jaw. "Do you?" Clara didn't answer, but her eyes held something close to fear. By the end of the week, Ruth had begun visiting more often, not just for Clara. She'd bring bread or soup or just sit and talk with June about books. Sometimes, Ellis would walk in and find the girl asleep in her lap. One night, Ruth asked Ellis to sit on the porch with her. The moon was full, and Bitter Creek was quiet. "You ever gonna tell me what happened to you?" she asked. "I changed." "That ain't an answer." He looked out over the dark road. "I did things I can't take back. Thought leaving it all behind would fix me, but it just made the silence louder." Ruth leaned back, arms crossed. "You trust me?" "I don't trust anyone." "Well," she said, "you better start thinking about who you can. Because Ryland Tuck has friends here. Quiet ones. Dangerous ones. Ellis looked at her then, truly looked, and saw something in her face, an old scar, just below the collarbone, mostly hidden. A reminder she didn't speak about. "You used to ride too," he said. She didn't confirm it, just stood and left without another word. The next day, Tuck showed up again. This time, he wasn't smiling. "Clara Holcomb's daughter," he said flat out. "She's mine by law, or will be when the right man says so." Ellis stepped in close. "You so sure the law is going to speak for you?" Tuck didn't flinch. "Not the law. The people. You think they'll protect a dying woman and her bastard kid when a man like me gives them something to gain?" Ellis's jaw clenched. "You walk away now," Tuck said, "and I'll let you live. You stay, and this town's going to turn cold. Fast." That night, Ruth came to the room again. She brought a map, marked a route through the hills. Quiet trails known only to riders like them. Ghost paths. "You need to go," she said. Ellis looked at her. "Why are you helping me?" She didn't blink. "Because I buried too many girls like June." Ellis took the map. "You coming with us?" "I can't." He stared at her. She said, softer, "There's someone I need to protect here. A boy. He doesn't know who I am. But I left him once already. I won't do it again." Ellis nodded. No judgment in his face. Just understanding. Before dawn, Ellis loaded Clara and June into the wagon. The road Ruth showed him wound up into the hills where no lawman or hired gun would follow easy. But Bitter Creek watched them leave. And as the wagon disappeared behind a ridgeline, Ryland Tuck lit a cigarette with steady hands and said to the man beside him, "That girl's worth more than you think. And I always collect what's owed." His companion, Arlen the blacksmith, just nodded. They made it halfway through the pass before the wagon gave out. One of the rear wheels splintered on a jagged stone hidden in the trail. The whole frame lurched, Clara cried out in pain, and June nearly tumbled forward before Ellis caught her by the shoulder. He cursed low under his breath and jumped down. The sky was turning gray, that early morning hour when even the birds don't trust the quiet. They were 3 days into the hills, on one of the old moonshine trails Ruth had marked. It was supposed to be forgotten country. No maps, no people, no danger. But Ellis had ridden long enough to know safety was never more than a myth. He examined the wheel. "We can't go farther like this." Clara's voice came weak from the back. "There's a shack, if it's still standing. North Slope, near a broken pine. My husband used to keep supplies there." Ellis met June's eyes. She didn't speak, but he could see it. Same question burning through her. "Are we being followed?" He didn't answer out loud. Instead, he grabbed what supplies he could and lifted Clara in his arms. June carried the bedrolls and the small bag of food, too quiet for a child her age. They found the shack by sundown. It was more rot than wood, but it stood. And the inside, though thick with dust and spiders, was dry. Ellis laid Clara down in the back corner and stoked a fire from dead pine. The smoke crawled up through the cracked roof and into the night. That was a mistake. He knew it the second he saw how the smoke curled like a signal. That night, Clara whispered something that didn't make sense. It wasn't just the money. Boyd had a ledger. Ellis leaned close. "What kind of ledger?" She tried to lift her hand, but couldn't. "Names. People he dealt with. Things they paid for. Ryland's name is in there. More than once." June stepped into the light then. "Where is it?" Clara's breath hitched. "Buried under the stone floor at the Holcomb place. Wrapped in oilcloth. He didn't think I knew." Ellis felt a shift in the ground beneath him, though nothing moved. That ledger, if what she said was true, was more than proof. It was power, enough to burn men like Ryland Tuck straight out of the world. He looked at June, but she was already walking to the window, jaw set. The next day, they were spotted. Ellis saw the glint of glass on a far ridge, binoculars, maybe or a rifle scope. He didn't wait. He took June into the woods and taught her how to disappear. How to move with the wind, not against it. How to listen for boots, not just breath. She learned fast. Too fast. That night, she asked something else that didn't fit. "Did you know my father before he died?" Ellis didn't answer. "You were one of them," Weren't you? She said. Like Ryland. He looked into the fire. I did things. Not like him, but not good either. Did you ever work with Boyd? No. She stared at him, unblinking. Then why did Mama trust you? Ellis didn't have an answer for that. And part of him wondered if Clara even truly did, or if she had just run out of options. Flashback. Winter, 6 years ago. A cabin in the woods, somewhere between Tennessee and Arkansas. Snow piled high against the door. A man screaming. Another one dead by the hearth, his chest caved in. Ellis stood in the center of it all, blood on his knuckles, trembling like a dog too long out in the cold. Clara stood at the edge, holding a baby in her arms. June, just a bundle of quiet breath. Boyd was on the ground, coughing, holding his broken wrist. Ellis turned and walked out. Didn't speak, didn't explain. He left that night thinking he'd escaped a fire. But the fire had followed him. Back in the shack, Clara slept less and less. Her body was losing ground fast, and her words started coming slow and strange. June sat beside her every day, whispering things Ellis couldn't hear. One night, Clara took Ellis's hand and pressed something into it. It was a small brass key, rusted, warm from her skin. The safe box. It's under the hearth, at the Holcomb place. What's inside? You know, he did. The ledger. Maybe more. Ellis stood at the edge of the clearing the next morning, rifle slung over his shoulder. He hadn't slept. The smoke from their fire had been seen. He'd found boot prints near the river, deep ones, 2 men, maybe 3. He turned back to the shack. Clara was dying. June was tougher than iron, but she couldn't hold off wolves alone. And the only way to end it, the only way, was to go back and get that ledger. Ellis came to June quietly and knelt beside her. I have to leave. She didn't look up. To get it? Yes. She stood. I'm coming with you. No. She'll die while you're gone. Ellis swallowed. I know. June's eyes welled, but she blinked the tears away like she'd done it before. I'll keep her warm. He touched her shoulder. If anyone comes, hide. Don't run. Hide. It took him 3 days to get back to the Holcomb place. The house was just bones now. Boards falling. Vines pulling it down. But the inside, it still remembered them. Ellis pulled up the hearthstone. Found the box buried deep in cold ash. The key turned smooth. Inside, yellowed papers, stacks of cash too moldy to be worth anything, and the ledger. He flipped through it by lamplight. Names he knew. Politicians. Traders. A sheriff from Missouri. Ryland's name 7 times. Dates. Amounts. Payment for transport. For flesh. For silence. Slavery had been outlawed, but men like Ryland never stopped selling lives. Just change how they did it. Ellis closed the book and tucked it inside his coat. He turned to go and heard the hammer of a gun click back. Ryland stood in the doorway. I knew you'd come, he said. 2 men flanked him. Arlen the blacksmith, and someone else, young, twitchy, sunburned face. All of them armed. Ellis raised his hand slowly. You want the ledger, right? Ryland smiled. I already have everything I need. But watching you die with that book in your coat, that's a bonus. Ellis glanced toward the back door. No time. He didn't hesitate. Dropped to the floor as the first shot rang out, then fired once, twice. Arlen fell, choking on blood. The young man ran. Ryland ducked behind the doorframe. The gunfight ripped through the quiet. Wood shattered. Fire caught in the drapes. Ellis crawled through broken glass, blood dripping down his arm, and made it to the back. He ran through the brush until his legs screamed, then kept running. He didn't stop until he was almost halfway to the shack again. He hid the ledger in a hollowed-out stump near the river, covered it in moss. If he died, it'd still matter. Someone would find it. He reached the shack at nightfall and smelled it before he saw it. Smoke. His heart collapsed in his chest. He stumbled forward, tearing through the brush, until he saw it. Flames rising from the roof, the structure glowing orange against the night. June, he roared. He heard her barely. A muffled cough. He found her behind a shack, curled behind a boulder, covered in soot. She was clutching something against her chest. Ellis dropped beside her, shaking. Are you hurt? She shook her head, dazed. Clara, he asked. June didn't speak, just buried her face in his coat and let out a single, dry sob. Ellis held her, his body aching. He looked at the shack as it burned down to embers, smoke rising into the stars. Later, after the fire died, she finally spoke. They came this morning, said they just wanted to talk. She told me to go outside. I ran. I heard them inside. Then the fire. Ellis didn't ask who it was. He knew. They said her name like they hated it, June whispered. Like she did something wrong just by living. Ellis stared at the sky. That's all it takes for some men. 2 days passed. Then 3. Ellis healed slow, but didn't stop moving. He and June traveled farther west, toward towns that wouldn't ask too many questions. They didn't talk about the ledger. Not until Ruth found them. She came riding up on a red mare, clothes dusty, rifle on her back. You left a hole in Bitter Creek the size of Texas, she said, dismounting. And Ryland's gone underground. I've got what he fears most, Ellis said, and handed her the ledger. Ruth opened it. Her hands trembled. I'll get it where it needs to go. Ellis nodded. I can't do it. They know my face. She looked at June. You ready to be hunted forever? June didn't blink. I already was. Ruth gave her a long, sad smile. You're more than what they tried to make you. That night, after Ruth rode off, Ellis and June sat beside a quiet creek. Fireflies moved slow through the dark. She asked if I was ready. June said, but I don't think you are. Ellis looked at her. Ready for what? To let go of the part of you that ran. Ellis stared into the flames. You sound like your mother. June tilted her head. She said you once saved her, but not the way you think. Ellis frowned. She said you're the first man who ever walked away when he had power over her. And that kind of man don't get to disappear. The world needs to know he's real. He didn't know what to say to that. So he didn't say anything at all. But inside, something cracked. Not from guilt. It had always been there. But from knowing that maybe, just maybe, he was still allowed to make something good out of what was left. They rode until the hills thinned out and the desert wind came harder. Days passed in long, sunburnt silence. Nights were worse, too cold, too quiet, and Ellis could feel the weight of Ruth's departure like a rope still tied around his waist. They had the truth now, locked inside that ledger she carried east. But truth alone didn't stop men like Ryland. And Ellis had the girl. That changed everything. June didn't speak much anymore. Not since the fire. Sometimes she'd startle awake at night, fists clenched, breathing like she'd run a mile in her sleep. Ellis would sit nearby, never touching her, just waiting for the storm in her to pass. There wasn't comfort in words, not between two people carrying things they didn't know how to name. By the 4th town, Ellis could tell something was off. A general store clerk looked at him too long. A rider passed them twice on the same road, slow enough to recognize faces. It wasn't Ryland, but it didn't have to be. He kept June close, told her they'd stay one night. But she didn't believe him, and neither did he. That night, she stole a horse and ran. Ellis woke up to an empty cot and hoof prints in the dark mud. His chest twisted in a way he hadn't felt since Tennessee. She'd left a note. I can't let you die from me. Not when I'm the reason they're still coming. Ellis didn't stop to eat. He took the gray gelding and rode hard north, following her trail through the basin. He didn't think, didn't pray, just followed the girl who had become more than a responsibility, more than a reminder. When he caught up, she was halfway to a ranch he recognized, Baxter Land. The Baxters were cousins to the Holcombs. Not good people, but family in name. Ellis had avoided them for a reason. June was walking the horse beside her, holding the reins like a peace offering as 2 men came to meet her in the field. Ellis knew one of them, Harmon Baxter. Big, loud, dumb, but loyal to gold, not blood. Ellis slid down the hill and shouted, June, don't. She froze. The Baxters reached for their guns. Ellis was already aiming. Easy, he called. I don't want blood. Harmon laughed. You're too late for that. Ryland came through 2 nights ago. Left coin and questions. You think we weren't going to answer? Ellis stepped closer. She's a child. She's property. Ellis didn't wait for the rest. The first shot dropped Harmon where he stood. The second grazed the second man's shoulder, spinning him backward. June ducked and ran. Ellis caught her behind a row of oaks. She was shaking. You shot them. They were going to take you. You said not to kill unless you had to. I had to. That silence stretched again. I thought I could end it, she whispered. I thought if I went to them, maybe they'd stop chasing us. Ellis couldn't tell her the truth yet. That men like Ryland never stopped. Not until they were dead or jailed. Or until the people chasing them became monsters too. The next day, they crossed into Dustwater, a border town filled with men on the run and women who didn't ask questions. The sheriff was dead. The law barely hung on. Ellis paid for a room with what little coin he had and kept June inside. He spent hours in the saloon asking quiet questions. Watching backs. Ruth was right. Ryland had gone underground, but his money hadn't. Men were taking orders, offering bounties, whispering names in the cups of rye. That night, Ellis returned to the room and found June gone again. But this time, she hadn't run. He saw the broken glass, the overturned chair, the drag marks on the floor. They kept her in a storage barn outside town, tied and blindfolded. Ryland was already there when Ellis arrived. He'd cleaned up, his coat new, his face shaven. He looked like the man he pretended to be, a businessman, a charmer. But Ellis saw it all, the rot beneath the grin. You've taken her twice now, Ellis said. You planning to make a pattern? Ryland shrugged. She belongs to a bloodline. My brother's. That makes her mine. Ellis stepped forward. That's not law. No, Ryland smiled. But neither was killing Harmon Baxter. Ellis raised his pistol. Let her go. Ryland's eyes flicked to the man on his left, then the one on the right. Both had guns. Ellis knew if he pulled the trigger, he'd get Ryland. But June wouldn't survive the crossfire. Then Ryland said something that shifted everything. She's not just his daughter. She's mine. Ellis felt the ground vanish. You're lying. No, I'm not. Ryland looked almost proud. Clara didn't tell you that part, did she? Boyd was sterile. I was the one she begged back when things were desperate. She thought it would fix things between them, but it didn't. Ellis stared at June. She'd stopped struggling, her face blank. She's not a child, Ryland went on. She's a reminder of everything Clara did to survive, of the choices she made. You think she wanted to keep June? She tried to leave her more than once. Ellis's vision narrowed. You're lying. I can prove it. He held out a folded paper, some form of old medical record. Clara's signature at the bottom. Names. Details. Ellis didn't reach for it. None of that changes the fact that you're a goddamn trafficker. Ryland shrugged. And what are you? A killer? A thief? You think saving one girl makes you better than the man you were? Ellis didn't blink. Yes. He pulled the trigger. The bullet took Ryland through the neck. The barn exploded into chaos. Ellis fired again, dropping one of the guards. The second shot caught him in the side. He fell hard, pain roaring in his ears. June broke loose, grabbed a lantern, and threw it into the dry straw. The fire bloomed fast. She dragged Ellis by the arm, blood soaking his shirt, his breath shallow. They didn't stop until they reached the edge of the cottonwoods. June collapsed beside him, hands covered in soot and ash. You're bleeding. I've bled worse. We need help. No, we need time. They rode south, Ellis barely holding to the reins. The wound festered. He knew it. June tended him, wrapping clean cloth, making soup from bone and salt. He slept hard, dreaming of Clara and fire and the creek that never stopped running. One night, she spoke while he dozed. I read the paper he dropped. Ellis opened his eyes. It was true, she said. You weren't wrong. But he wasn't either. She didn't cry. I don't know what that makes me. Ellis reached for her hand. It makes you you. But things didn't get better. Ellis weakened. By the time they reached White Rock, he could barely sit straight in the saddle. The town had no doctor, just a retired preacher and a salve seller who charged too much. June stole what they needed. Ellis didn't stop her. The line had been crossed, again and again, until it was gone. One night, as he lay fevered, She pressed her head to his chest and whispered, "I'm scared." "I know. Are we bad people now?" "No." "How do you know?" "Because we didn't choose the fire. We just lived through it." A week later, Ruth returned. She found them in an abandoned miner's hut near the ridge. Her eyes were sunken. Her clothes were torn, but she smiled when she saw them both. "It's done," she said. "I delivered the ledger. People are falling. Arrests. Names and headlines. Someone even burned down Ryland's old ranch." Ellis was too weak to stand. She went to him. "You need a doctor." "He needs rest," June said. "And a safe place." Ruth nodded. "I've got one. Deep Valley. Off the maps. Only women and children live there. Survivors." Ellis looked at her. "You trust them?" "With my life." He turned to June. She gave the faintest nod. They left that night. The wind blew strong through the pass. Ellis rode slow, every breath painful, but lighter in a way he hadn't been in years. Ruth rode ahead. June sat beside him, silent, watchful. They didn't speak of blood or betrayal or fathers who lied. They spoke of water, of peace, of building something no one could burn. And in the hush between the wind and hoofbeats, Ellis realized the fight hadn't ended. But neither had they. They reached the hidden valley before the first snow. It was quiet country, a bowl of green tucked into jagged cliffs, where the trees grew thick and the roads disappeared into brush. Ruth called a hollow bend. No signs, no maps, just women and children who'd vanished from a world that had tried to break them. They lived in silence, planting their own food, building their own homes. Some wore scars on their faces. Others never spoke at all. Ellis didn't ask questions. He could barely ride by the time they arrived, and Ruth had to lift him off the horse herself. He was thin now, all edges and shadows. His wound had healed over poorly. Infection still burned under the skin. He didn't say anything, but June knew. She saw in the way he held his side, how he winced just from turning to speak. She stayed near him, read to him, helped carry water. She laughed sometimes now, just little moments, but it still sounded like something half remembered. Ruth gave her space. No one in Hollow Bend asked what she'd been through. They didn't need to. They recognized their own. For a while, it felt like the running was done. But that peace never lasts. Not when there are debts still open. Not when secrets were still buried. Ellis woke one morning with blood on his shirt again. More than usual. He didn't tell June. But Ruth saw the stain when she changed the bandage. "You're dying," she said softly. He didn't argue. Ruth sat beside him, folding the cloth. "There's something you haven't told her. You've carried it too long. And if you die before saying it, she'll carry that weight not knowing why." Ellis closed his eyes. He had always known the day would come. "Clara didn't ask me to protect her," he said. "She asked me to protect June. Not because of who was chasing her, but because of who she was born from. Clara didn't know how to love her. Not really. And she hated herself for it." Ruth frowned. "She told me one night, before the fever took her mind completely, that she wished she'd left June on a church step. That sometimes she looked at her and only saw what had been done to her. That she was terrified June would grow up like him." Ruth was silent a long time. Then, but she didn't. "No," Ellis exhaled. "She grew up like her. Brave. Alone. Still standing." That night, the valley changed. June had been playing cards with a boy near her age, a quiet one who stuttered when nervous. He'd handed her a note, scratched and folded so many times the paper barely held together. She didn't know who gave it to him. The note read, "Your real father lives. He knows where you are. Ask Ellis why he lied." She went cold. She didn't sleep that night. Just sat at the edge of the stream with her knees pulled to her chest, trying to remember if Ellis had ever actually said Ryland was dead. He hadn't. He just stopped talking about him. In the morning, she confronted him. Her voice cracked when she asked, "Is he alive?" Ellis didn't lie. "Yes." June didn't move. Her eyes burned. "You said you shot him." "I did." "Then why is he still out there?" Ellis looked down at his hands. "Because I didn't finish the job. The fire caught before I could. I thought the flames took him. But Ruth told me later," he crawled out. burned but breathing. June's fist shook. You should have told me. I didn't want you living with that fear. She stepped back. You mean you didn't want to lose me? That's different. He stood slowly, wincing, face pale. You were never his. No matter the blood. You don't get to decide that. Ruth came up the path then, walking fast. We've got trouble. They found the bodies at the northern border of Hollow Bend. 2 women, shot clean through the heart. Their horses were gone. No one saw who did it. But tracks ran back toward the pass, deep ones, made by 3 riders. And Ellis knew that kind of trail. He'd left them often enough. They found us, he said. Ruth's jaw set. We'll hold the line. Ellis shook his head. They didn't come for the valley. They came for her. Ruth turned to June, who had gone deathly quiet. Then we sent her away, Ruth said. We hide her deeper. No, June said. I'm done hiding. Ellis tried to speak. She cut him off. If I run now, they'll follow again. Another fire. Another dead friend. I'm not going to live waiting to be dragged back into hell. Not anymore. There was a weight in her voice that Ellis couldn't push down. She had crossed her line, and she wouldn't go back. That night, June left camp alone. She took Ruth's rifle, a saddlebag of bullets, and a compass. She left a note. He took my mother. I'll take his name. I'll finish it. When Ellis woke and saw the empty cot, the note still damp from her ink, something in him collapsed. He tried to stand, but pain dropped him back. Ruth was already mounting her horse. I'll go, she said. You can't. But Ellis grabbed her wrist. I have to. She looked at him, saw the way he trembled. But she didn't stop him. They saddled 2 horses. Left before dawn. June followed the pass east, through the gorge that cut between the hills like a scar. She rode hard, thought harder. She didn't know if she wanted to kill him. Not really, but she wanted him to know she existed, that she wasn't scared anymore. She didn't expect him to find her first. Ryland stepped out from behind a broken tree, face half burned, skin like melted wax. His voice was rougher now, but his smile was still the same. You grew up mean, he said. She raised the rifle. He didn't flinch. I never wanted you, he said. Your mother made that choice. But you are mine, and I don't let go of what's mine. She didn't speak. You think I'm some monster, he said, laughing. I'm just the part of you you keep trying to pretend doesn't exist. She fired. The bullet clipped his shoulder. He dropped back, swearing, gun drawn. They both fired at once. Ruth and Ellis arrived to the sound of gunshots. They found June crouched behind a rock, out of bullets, breathing hard. Blood down her arm. Ryland limping, circling closer, pistol still hot. Ellis didn't stop to think. He fired once. Ryland dropped, but not dead. He lay groaning, coughing blood. June stared at him, then picked up his gun and walked toward him. Ellis didn't move. Ruth whispered, "Don't let her." Ellis didn't answer. June stood over Ryland. He looked up at her with one eye open. You gonna do it? He rasped. She lifted the pistol. He laughed, blood in his teeth. You are my daughter. She aimed, then dropped the gun. No, she said. Not anymore. Ryland bled out within the hour. Ellis sat with June on the rocks, holding pressure to her wound. She stared at the horizon, not crying, not shaking, just still. Ruth came over, knelt beside them. It's done. June nodded slowly. Then why doesn't it feel like it? Ellis spoke, voice thin, because nothing ever ends clean. That night, Ellis collapsed. He didn't wake. They brought him back to Hollow Bend. Ruth did what she could. June stayed at his side, holding his hand, whispering stories he'd once told her by firelight. He opened his eyes only once. I was never a father, he said, but you were my child all the same. June leaned down. You saved me. No, he whispered. You saved me. He died with her name on his lips. They buried him at the edge of the valley, near the river. The wind moved through the trees. The grave was marked with stones. No name, no cross. Just a carved circle, the same symbol he used to draw in the dirt when he was thinking. June stood alone at the grave long after everyone else had gone. She didn't cry. She didn't speak. But something in her changed, and the wind carried it away. They planted winter cabbage where Ellis was buried. June did it herself, hands in the dirt, sleeves rolled up, soil under her nails. Ruth offered to help, but June only shook her head. She didn't say much anymore, not because she was broken, but because she was careful. In the months after Ellis died, Hollow Bend settled into a rhythm again. Ruth taught first aid to the older girls. A few women rebuilt the northern fence. Word came from the east. Ryland's network had unraveled fast. The ledger Ruth carried had burned reputations, jailed judges, cost men their land and legacies. But no one ever came looking for the girl. Not again. June kept the pistol Ellis left her, but she never wore it. It sat in a cloth bundle beneath her cot, wrapped in his old bandana. Some nights she'd hold it, not for protection, but because it still smelled faintly like him, sweat, smoke, and pine. She read often now, spoke when it mattered, helped the young ones who came to the valley, girls with torn shoes and bruises under their sleeves. She sat beside them and never asked what had happened, only offered water, food, and the kind of silence that didn't hurt. One girl, maybe 7, asked her one night, "Did your mama get better?" June paused, then smiled soft. "No, but she tried." The girl nodded like she understood. Maybe she did. Ruth still rode out every few weeks, bringing back cloth, medicine, and news. She'd stop sometimes on the trail where Ellis once taught June how to listen for boots in the grass. She said she felt him there, still watching, still guarding. A year passed, then another. June grew into herself slowly, like trees do, without hurry, but solid. One spring, a traveler wandered into Hollow Bend. He wore clean boots and had a fresh scar over his brow. Said he'd heard there was a place where people who didn't belong could rest a while. Ruth eyed him with suspicion. June gave him water. "Who told you about this place?" she asked. He smiled. A man with one eye and a crooked smile. Met him near the ridge. Said to come west if I ever got tired of being hunted. Ruth stiffened. June just nodded. "Then I guess you're meant to be here," she said. That night, she sat by the fire and stared into the coals. Ellis was gone, but not undone. The man who'd once taken a dying woman's child and vanished into the wilderness had left more than a grave behind. He'd left a thread, and she would carry it, stitch by stitch, until it held the whole thing together again. The twist maybe was this. The outlaw who'd once run from justice had built something close to it, and the girl born from violence had become the one who sheltered others from it. Neither escaped what they were, but neither let it define what they'd become.